Now the chest X-ray is very important when it comes to CHF. In order to understand the abnormal X-rays seen in CHF, we need to know what the normal chest X-ray looks like. So right in the center we have the trachea, and the trachea bifurcates, and the point where it bifurcates is known as the carina. On the right side, on the left side, you can see this knob, this knuckle. This is basically the aortic knuckle, and the lower border of this aortic knuckle coincides with the bifurcation of the trachea. On both sides of the heart, you can see these vessels, and these vessels, the area where these vessels are coming from is known as the hilum of the lungs. Now you can see these vessels going up and down, making this kind of a thing. Now on the other side, you can see. Now in this hilum, you have the pulmonary arteries and veins present over here. This thing over here, which is right beneath the aortic knob, is the pulmonary artery. And then you have the left heart. This is known as the cardiophrenic angle, and this is the costophrenic angle, both sides. The hilum normally originates somewhere beneath the fifth rib. So if this is the second rib, third rib, fourth rib, fifth rib, then we have the hilum which is originating somewhere over here. So normally these vesicular markings are greater in the lower portion of the heart, and they are very less in the upper portion of the heart, and that's because of the gravity. So because the gravity forces, there are more vesicular markings down and less vesicular markings up. On the other hand, if we look at the periphery of the lung, look at this area over here, it's devoid of these vesicular markings, these vascular markings. So the first stage of CHF is vascular redistribution. Now here what happens is that the vessels, they start to become engorged with fluid. So normally if these vessels are like this, they are more on the downside and less in the upper side. What happens in CHF is that you will see that the upper vessels also now become engorged, and you will see vascular markings that will extend into the periphery. So normally in a chest X-ray you don't have vascular markings in the periphery, but now these vascular markings from the hilum are moving to the periphery as well, and this is precisely what we call as vascular redistribution. The next stage after vascular redistribution is interstitial thickening, interstitial edema, sorry. So you have an alveolus initially, and you have the vessel, blood vessel on the other end. The first step is that this blood vessel starts to become engorged and full of blood. Then what happens is that the blood starts to ooze out, and as we discussed, this respiratory membrane that there is between the alveoli and the blood vessel, it starts to get edematous. The anatomy of the lung is such that the lung has these lobules, and and the alveoli are clumped up to form these these lobules, these lung lobules, and between these lung lobules you will find that there is a septa, or a partition, that is known as the interlobular septa over here. Fluid starts to accumulate. It accumulates within these interlobular septa, and when it's accumulating within these interlobular septa, what happens is that these septa now become more and more thick, and when they become more and more thick, what happens is that we can see on the chest X-ray we can see certain lines, and those lines are known as the
curly B line. So you have this thickening occurring of these septa because there is interstitial edema. Now there's fluid and thickening. Now the most peripheral part of the lung will actually show this edema of the interlobular septa, and you will see certain lines occur because of this, and these lines are known as the curly B lines, and these lines are basically telling us now that the interstitium is now becoming edematous. Another identification point of the interstitial edema is that these vessels that are originating from the hilum, you can't quite differentiate these vessels. So they're all when edema develops, so they all become very mixed up, and you can't tell which is a vessel and which is not. And this finding is known as the hilar haze. So after this vascular congestion leading to interstitial edema, the final thing that happens is that you see that the alveoli will now develop edema, and we call this as alveolar edema. So this is the third finding that you see on a chest x-ray. The way you can see alveolar edema on a chest x-ray is that you will start to see clouds in the lung. There will be clouds, grey clouds in the lung, and that actually tells us that alveolar edema is occurring. So you look at the chest x-ray and you start having this cloudy kind of a picture in the chest x-ray. And this is actually showing us that now alveolar edema is also occurring. So these clouds are present everywhere. It's not like it's just present in one way. It's basically a diffuse kind of an appearance. Another very important finding in CHF is cardiomegaly. So normally we have the cardiothoracic ratio, which is less than half. So the width of the heart as compared to the width of the thorax is less than half. But in CHF, what can happen is that we can find cardiomegaly. So this heart can become enlarged like this, and you can actually see that this cardiothoracic ratio it becomes more than half. So we looked at the costophrenic angles and the cardiophrenic angles. But and the importance of this is that in CHF another thing can develop, that is pleural effusions. Now in CHF these angles become blunted. You can't quite demarcate, so you don't know where these angles are starting from, and this shows us that there is pleural effusion occurring. So if these angles become blunted, you can't see these angles anymore, then you say that pleural effusion is occurring. Now let's look at a real X-ray. Now the first thing that stands out here is that you can actually see that the heart, you can see the heart, there's obvious cardiomegaly over here. And if you look at if you compare the thoracic ratio with the cardiac ratio, you can see that it's greater than half. So there's obvious cardiomegaly. Then the other thing you can see is that you can see that these vessels are now very prominent from the hilum. This is the hilar vessels, and you can see that due to congestion they've become very prominent. And you can see these vessels up here as well, which is known as cephalization. You can see that you can't quite distinguish between these vessels that well as you could see in the normal X-ray. So there's this haze, this hilar haze as well. So here's the cephalization. You can see these vessels which are here. You can see this hilar haze over here. And then you have another finding. This finding, you can see that, as I said, these clouds occurring in the lungs. So you can see this cloudy thing. Now if I were to make some clouds here in the lung on my own, you would see that what close a resemblance it's making to this cloud over here, this cloudy part. You can't quite see through it. Now this is another chest x-ray that I've taken, and the point here is that I want to show you the curly B lines. First thing you need to remember is that you need to know the ribs. Now you need to know the border of the ribs. As you can see that there is a clear border of these ribs, and they should not be confused with the curly B lines. So if you can see this line right here, this is a curly B line, and these other lines are well as well. This line over here. Now coming back to our X-ray, the last part is that we need to assess these claustrophrenic and cardiophrenic angles, and we need to look for any kinds of pleural effusion. So here in this X-ray, you can see that they're fairly distinct. You can quite demarcate and look at this these angles.